got on my Christmas dress. We've got some Christmas lights, so it's time for another Felicity Crafts Christmas. And today we are going to make this sweet robin decoration, who can have legs or not, depending on how you want it, ready for your tree. Or a whole garland of them if that's what you want. So for this we're going to need some brown felt. Felt is the best thing for this one. You can try it with different fabrics if you want, but felt is a good one. You're going to need something to contrast for the wings, so I've chosen a beige one. You could use that for the wing, for the beak as well, but I've got a little scrap of yellow, so I've got that. We're going to need some thread that matches. I couldn't actually find any sewing thread, so I'm using embroidery cotton that's exactly the right colour, and it's absolutely fine. A needle. We're going to need some scissors for some cutting out. I'm choosing googly eyes today. You can put felt eyes or you could sew the eyes, but I'm going to use those. And because I'm using googly eyes, I will need the glue gun to stick them on. You could use PVA and just wait, but it will be quicker like this. We're going to need some red to make it into a robin, and in this case I'm not using felt, but I could have done. I've got some scraps of fabric left over from something else, and I'm going to need just a very small amount of toy stuffing. You might have that left over from one of our other projects, or you might get some out of an old pillow if that's what you want. So we're going to have to cut a square to start with. So I have got out my trusty coaster, cut around it, and it's a 10cm square because that's what the coaster is, but you could do anything. So that's going to be our robin's body. For his beak, I'm going to just do 2 tiny little triangles. So I have cut those out like that, 2 tiny little ones like that. And I want his wings to be exactly the same. So I'm going to fold my felt over and cut right through. And I'm going to cut a wing shape or a teardrop shape, you could call this. And you can mess about deciding exactly how you want that to look. It's not essential that they're exactly the same if you wanted to have a slightly more unusual looking bird, but there are his 2 wings. If you wanted to put some legs on, you could cut those now too, 2 little things like that. So we'll just go with our felt so far and then come back to our red part afterwards. So when we've got our square, we're going to do the fold that we have done several times now, from this point to make it into a triangle. So I'm folding like that, and we've got ourselves a triangle. Because this is felt, it is not going to hold the fold when I do this, even if you got your iron out, but you don't need to. It's not going to hold it, but if you just squash it together a little bit for a few minutes, it'll help. A little bit stuck on there, a bit of cat hair stuck on there. Then we need to make his head. So the thing that makes it from the triangle into the slightly better looking robin is his head. So we're going to take this point here and we're going to push it inside. And that is going to make his head. Keep pushing it until you decide that you're happy. It doesn't matter that it's bulky in there because we're going to stuff it anyway. You don't need to cut it. Don't cut. Just keep reorganising it until you're happy. So I'll just show you that again. We've got this point and I'm just pushing it inside, wriggling it around until I'm happy with it. And then that would be our robin, and you can see that that's the shape of it. But before we sew along these edges, it's easier to put the wings on now. So you're going to put the wings on and decide where you want them on either side. Just take a little bit of time to make them look as if they are even on both sides. So you're going to look and you're going to think, right, is that one on that side? Do they look about right? And they look like that. Open it up, and it doesn't actually matter if that's pinging off now like that. It's just for where you were going to have it. Now I've tied a knot in my thread because it's not going to be seen, and I'm just going to attach it with a running stitch. I think running stitch looks good for this kind of thing because you're doing something that looks rustic. So it's supposed to look as if it's sewn on in a simple way. So it suits that. If you wanted to get some matching thread and do a little stab stitch around the edge, that's absolutely fine too, if that's the way you want it to look. I like this sort of ragdoll look, if that's what I want to say. So I'm going to do just that kind of stitch all the way around so that you can see it, because that's what I want. You could have done thicker thread as well if you want it. And then do it onto the other side, tie that off and do it on the other side. Then you're going to put that back together again. I'll just take that through to the other side so I don't spoil that one. So when you do that, you can do the one on the other side as well. And cut that off. Then you're going to go back to how you had it before, where you folded like that and put his head in, except I'm doing that the wrong way now because his head needs to be on this side. So put that like that. Now when you've wriggled it around, now is the time to decide where you want your beak, because you're going to catch the beak in now. Now you can have your beak as just one little triangle if you want, sticking out, and I recommend putting it just at the join of where that is there. So not right up there because he hasn't got it like a unicorn. You want to put that in there. I quite like my robins to be singing, so I'm going to use 2, and he's got his little beak open like that. You'll notice that I'm not pinning anything. Feel free to get your pins out if you want to get your pins out. I don't actually go with a lot of pinning. I like to do a lot of holding as I go along, but you know, if you want to, you do it. Now we're going to sew all the way along there and all the way along there. And just before you get to the end, wait, leave your thread, put your toy stuffing inside, and then sew up that last bit and over sew all the way along so that you've got that and that. And I'll see you in a moment when I've done that. Now this is a slightly different version. If you forgot or you just find that there was just too much holding or you want to minimise your sewing, you can just glue them on. So in this case, I've glued on his wings so they're flapping just a little bit now. And I just glued on, so he's now got those slightly more 3D wings than this one. And I also glued on his beak. So if you find that you've forgotten or it's just a little bit fiddly to hold it in, don't worry about it. You're going to do the same thing with his eyes. So you can use felt here and you could carefully sew it, but I'm actually going to glue his googly eyes on one side and then the other side, so that you can just have those on like that. Now PVA glue does work perfectly well for something like this actually if you don't have a glue gun, but you will need to leave it for a little while to dry, and overnight is really the best thing to do. So that will work as well. PVA glue does stick felt very nicely and that looks good. But that's only a bird, that's not a robin. We need to have him looking red, don't we? So we need to get ourselves a heart shape. And remembering that hearts are symmetrical, what you're going to do is fold your piece of fabric in half and cut yourself out a half heart shape. I'm going to use my pinking shears, and I'm using the pinking shears because this is just a little bit frayy. So our half heart shape then opened up and you ended up with that. And you're going to put this like that. So halfway through the heart, you're just going to put it on like that. And you could sew or glue. This time I'm going to glue because this is my glued one, but you could also just sew that again with that nice rustic ragdoll looking running stitch, and it would look really nice. But you can also just get out your glue, whether it's PVA or glue gun, and there we have. Now we could put legs on here and sew them off if you want to. I sewed those afterwards. You can do it like that. You could of course have gone inside with your hanging loop before you started, but I decided to make a bit of a feature of it there, and sometimes you could put a little button on there if you want as well to make him hang up like that. On the one with the legs I did actually sew the date, so it says 2015 onto his legs, because I quite like doing that with Christmas decorations so that you can remember what you were doing when you did that. Okay, so we've got him, he looks a bit more like he's flying when it's that one. It's up to you how much stuffing you use, whether you want to have a nice fat robin or whether you want to have a very sewn robin or whether you want to have a slightly glued robin. All of those robins look really good and they will look great on your Christmas tree. There's just one more little friend I wanted to introduce you to. If you're a crocheter, you could make another kind of robin, which is a circle just in half like that. So I'm just going to show you that, but Crochet is harder to pick up, and we will look at that later on Felicity Crafts later in the year. But this is also our little peg reindeer, and you can see how it is. It's just 2 pegs stuck that way, 1 peg stuck the other way, nose and googly eyes all glued together, and that looks really nice too. 2 friends to help us go through Christmas. Goodbye.